Greetings and salutations to our fine podcast audience. Welcome to 3 Ps in a Pod, episode 270.
We made it.
Yes, we did. I'm going to say something to start this episode that will not shock either of y'all.
Okay.
We need to clarify some things.
Oh.
What's we clarifying?
Well, we did an episode, was it?
Don't know how to clarify milk.
Clarifying
Or
milk.
butter.
I assume you've done this.
I just knew that was a thing.
It's a thing. When I said clarify, that was the first thing that came to your mind.
Well, I'm a cow guy.
That's right.
I grew up around cattle, so
And
go
went
ahead.
straight to the farm.
Let's forget that. That's
We should do an episode. Speaking of clarify, we should do an episode about raw milk.
Okay.
Y'all know about raw milk?
Yeah,
No,
let's
I don't.
Let's don't. Boy, would that up our hits if we
People are going to be up, but then we are going to just throw some people for a loop and be really upset.
Let's don't
with us.
talk about raw milk.
We don't need to talk about raw milk.
We're clarifying our previous statements.
Oh, gotcha.
I got you.
You're saying things we said were either unclear or wrong.
Well, yeah.
Or we answered a question somebody didn't ask.
Also,
right.
that we made some assumptions
That's right.
and then we ran down that.
Yes.
That is a little shocking to me.
Really?
No,
Okay.
no,
I didn't
of
think
course
so.
not. This is what we expect.
Oh, absolutely.
I just assume most people ask questions. We start with the answer and they go, that's not what I
That's not
said.
what I was asking.
So I'm going to stop.
Yes.
I'm not even interested in trying to get you guys on the right track. You were so far off.
But I will say this might be the first time or one of the very few times when a listener reached back out and said, hey, thanks for answering the question, but here's what I was really wanting to know.
Yeah.
And that's great. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I
I will say
really
we've
did
asked
appreciate that.
people to do that before, and either this is our first error ever,
Yeah.
or no one else has just cared enough to go. They heard us say it and they go, if that's how they answer what they
That's right.
thought I was asking,
That's right.
I don't care to get an answer.
Or
to
they
my
answered in a
question.
way back where we thought they were trolling us.
Maybe.
Well, that may
You
be
know,
true.
there have been some responses where we go,
I think that's a troll.
I think that's a troll.
We've had our share of trolling.
Yeah.
That's true.
But not this one. So, the episode that I believe we are referring to was someone had asked the question of what's a Christian response to how a nation defends itself? Is that exactly how
Something like
Charlie
that.
just read it.
that's close
Loving,
enough.
is it loving for a nation to defend itself?
Yes.
No,
And
what's the most loving way for a
Right.
nation?
That's
to
right.
defend itself?
And we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. And so then we get this back from the person who wrote in the question. They said, and they say, thank you for addressing my question. But here's what they said. I was asking the should a nation go to war and defend other nations question from the perspective of someone who was considering entering the military and not necessarily for voting reasons. So they would like us to clarify from the perspective of what would we say? I believe, again, that's not all. I'm making words up.
I was going to say, they're going to send another one goes, I didn't want another
didn't want
podcast
that.
episode.
That's right.
But thank you for
But
giving
there-
another
hey,
one.
you're getting one.
Yeah,
whether you
this
like it
is
or
what
not.
we got to have stuff.
Because I thought what's inside the clarification is worthy discussion.
I
you
agree.
know,
I
what
agree.
would we say as pastors, and
Mhm.
as a pastoral, advice or direction to someone who's a Christian who wants to thoughtfully make a decision on whether they want to be a part of the military or anything like that. And
Yeah.
we've had this. I mean, I think all of us would say we've had these discussions with people before,
That's right.
and they're good discussions
With individual
individual
Yeah,
people.
people
that's
come to
Yeah.
us and say, I'm considering going to the military.
That's right.
And what would you say?
Yeah. So we thought we would just talk about that for a little bit, and maybe that'll help. I don't know if you're still in the process of making.
Or
that
there may be
decision.
other people who are considering
yeah,
it.
for
and
sure. Yeah.
I think for sure what would be very helpful I hope will be helpful for people who are listening is a way to approach things that aren't really clear in the scriptures in a black and white statement, but to be able to approach it thoughtfully
Mhm.
and in a Christ-like manner. Because I think often what happens is we read the scriptures, and the way some of us were taught to read the scriptures is, the Bible is the manual for life, or it's the roadmap for life. And so anything
Mhm.
you want, any decision you have to make, you got to go to the Bible,
Mhm.
find a proof text, you got to
Yeah.
find a scripture that backs it up. And then then that's the thing you got to do. The Bible says it, so that settles it. You got to go do it. But there are a lot of things in life, and I don't just mean things that are that have, the internet and things that didn't exist at the time. I even mean specifically this. You can look into the Bible and find things around military service and war and army that looks very like God is. I am pro this. And then you can look into the scriptures and find things where you go, wow, it really seems like Jesus doesn't want anybody to do any kind of forceful act or violent act. And so you either leave more confused, which I spent a lot of my life very confused around this, or you walk away with the thing you maybe already wanted to see, and you go, well, I have a scripture and that's all I needed. But I think the approach for a lot of things in life, where the Bible is not, there's not an explicit command around it. For example, I mean by of don't lie, or don't, or
don't murder,
don't
steal.
Right.
Yeah.
These kind of things is to approach it through the lens of Jesus, right? That's the lens we start. And then also to trust the Spirit's going to lead, to have wise and thoughtful approaches to this, and then also to do that in community.
And I think what's also important is because the approach you talk about, Nathan, a lot of times we go to the scriptures and we think we found the thing on either side of that.
Sure.
You talked about there's some scriptures that say look like this, others that look like this. And then what I find is a lot of Christians will just latch on to the one that resonates most with them. And then all of a sudden that becomes the one and only way to view that.
That's Jesus' position on the issue.
And then I look at people who have thoughtfully taken a different direction, and I either vilify them or I want to argue them outside the kingdom somehow. And I don't think that's a good approach either, because cards on the table, I have a place that I fall on this particular issue.
Sure.
Personally for me, that I have worked out in prayer with God. But I also know that there are believers that have not done that, and they've come out, or they have done that, and they've come out on the other side.
The same prayer and the same
exact
study
thing.
and the same
That's
thoughtful
right.
approach.
And I don't think God spoke out of both sides of his mouth. I think there are just different ways of settling that within your own conscience.
Well, and I'll say
that I'm okay with.
My
Yes, I agree with
experience
that.
on this has been, as the oldest person here, that mine has changed through the years. I've had positions. So I had a friend. I wouldn't say a good friend, because I don't think that would characterize our relationship, but a fairly good friend who used to do concerts. He's dead now, and he often would get in trouble in his concerts by saying to people he could not pledge allegiance to the flag and those kind of things, because he had pledged allegiance to Jesus. And at the time I thought, man, you're just being provocative for the sake of being provocative and
Which
all
he
that.
might have been.
Well, I also have wondered about that.
I know.
But his stance on that has always rung in my head. I was on a total different place than him at the time with all of that. And I would say I'm closer to that now. One of the things that I have said to people who've been at this place before is most of us in this country who are Christians have, and we talked about this a little bit when we first answered it about the political, how do you vote and on, that kind of stuff, is that politics is always a mixed bag. And so you're compromising on some point. But the difficulty for the military is nobody cares what your opinion is once you have taken the oath.
That's right.
And so if you decide to take the oath to serve, the people above you may not share your Christian values.
True.
They may not, in fact, even be Christian. They may not be people that consider what God wants on anything. And even if all of those in the chain of command for our military do, the people who pull their strings, which are the politicians in our country, probably don't. But you're either going to have to decide to violate the oath you made if you want to stand with Jesus, which, that would be a Christian stance, or you're going to be bound by your oath to do something that would violate your conscience often because of political decisions. And so for me, as I was talking it through with a person, one of the last ones, as I got to, I said, this for me, and I know that often when we talk about being unequally yoked, the only place it gets tied is to marriage, but it also applies in business.
Sure.
Mhm.
I wouldn't encourage a Christian to get close business tied to a person who didn't share their Christian values.
Mhm.
And if I'm somewhere in the chain of command and I'm not the top,
Mhm.
I pledge an oath to obey the chain of command. I've put myself in a tough position as a follower of Jesus. That's just one way of looking at it.
Yeah,
and I
that's
know
right. That's
everybody doesn't look at it that way.
Mhm.
And I have other reasons that over time, over
Yeah.
40 something years of following Jesus, my view on some things have changed.
Mhm.
Some of it to deal with people I have tried to help recover from their service.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about that before.
Oh yeah.
The damage that are done to people who serve often.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Mhm.
Yeah. So I think the two approaches that maybe we should try and talk about for this discussion that might be helpful is, I think a little what Ed was doing there is what I would call a pastoral approach, which is, I think there are things that we have to look at and just say, what is the thoughtful, if I was at your, and maybe we're not, I don't know. We're three pastors in a pod, but I don't know if we're your pastors.
That's right.
But if I was your pastor and you came in, like Ed just talked about, there is a pastoral approach where I would say, let's talk about how you personally are going to be able to follow Jesus in this particular environment.
Because Jesus takes oaths very seriously.
He does.
Yes.
He says, you should let your yes be yes. Don't make these things lightly.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then there's the other one, which I would say is maybe looking at, okay, well, what have Christians, because to say, and this is why like our church as a whole doesn't have a stance on this, because
Right.
No,
there isn't
right.
a
We don't.
clear scriptural
Mhm.
thing for us at least to build a doctrinal statement around. There are Christian denominations that have built doctrinal, maybe not denominations, but certainly streams and traditions of Christianity that have made statements around it. But I do think one of the benefits we have as Christians is there have been thoughtful Christians throughout history who have wrestled with all kinds of issues that you can look at and you can go, well, how have they worked it out? And then how have people on the other side? And so maybe to look at, well, what are the kind of two, what I would say, primary Christian approaches if you had it on a spectrum? And there are obviously people who exist somewhere in between these kind of polar ends.
Mhm.
So maybe we should start there and then kind of get to something a little more pastoral that might be able to help with that. And so the two kind of Christian streams on this that are on the end, and I talked about this a little in that episode we talked about, is there's what we would call the Christian either pacifist or peace teaching, nonviolent approach. Those Christians who fall on that end tend to usually be in traditions that take the Sermon on the Mount, and I don't know if I would say literally, they may not like me saying literally, but as in individual commands that should be followed as they're written. Okay, and that once again, that's a one end of the spectrum. There are Christians who exist all the way in
I was
between.
going to say there's even variations within that.
Right, but the most
basically.
extreme version of the PC.
Yeah, most extreme would say no violence, no time, nowhere, any of any stripe.
Well, and beyond that, I was thinking about the thing Ed said. Most of them would say you can't take any oaths of any kind.
That's
because
right.
when Jesus says, don't take oaths, let your yes be your yes, they take that literally to mean you can't pledge allegiance to the flag. You can't sign up for any kind of government service. Because in Ed's language, once again, this isn't necessarily what Ed was saying, but it's a
thing to consider.
Yes, it's an extreme version of this, which is to say, they would say, if I'm taking an oath to a person who is beyond Christ, no oaths but Christ, they would say, I'm getting myself into a situation where if I'm going to honor that, which I'm supposed to be a person who's faithful to my oath, right? I can't do that now if they're asking me to do something outside of that. So that's kind of one. They would say no military service, usually no political service, like even being a politician, because in order to defend your nation, you might have to send other people to war.
Or you are practicing force against others to force them to do something.
Sure.
And that's part of the violent stance or the nonviolent stance.
So that would be and typically on that side, they consider any kind of power that is over anybody to be to be not
antithetical to the teachings of Jesus.
Yes, that would be
That's
it
what they
would be
say.
not Christ-like. So
right.
the most extreme version of this that you could maybe picture tends to be the Amish tend to fit into
Yeah.
this kind of community.
Most Quakers.
Most Quakers tend to fit
The
into
Anabaptists.
Yeah,
are in that
Anabaptists,
camp.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so that's one end. The other kind of, once again, this is other end of the spectrum, is what's called just war theory. And these are Christians who believe that God has given the command, and I'm trying to make sure I'm saying all this correctly. The command that God has is for us to not murder.
Mhm.
It is not to not kill.
Yes.
So they would say murder, and the way they would kind of philosophically break it out is murder is
Unjust killing.
it's unjust killing, and usually there's contempt involved.
Mhm.
It's I am angry at you. I have it's usually malice in my heart. There's a reason I've decided I'm going to do violence against you. So they would say exempt within that would be violence that is done not from a place of malice and contempt,
Mhm.
but is done from a place to protect other people
Mhm.
or to
Punish for crime.
to be punished for crimes, right? So all of these kind of things. So obviously in that camp, Christians could serve in the military or in the police or in a political framework because they would be able to engage in those things in a just and Christ-like way, is the way that just war theory would say. And on top of that, they would also say God gives, and there is part of this from Romans 13,
yeah.
right? That God gives the right to governments, which are beyond individual people to make these decisions. Governments have been given the authority of the sword, right, to do justice when there are cases where things have gotten, there's so much evil. It's really to restrain evil. When evil has
and that's one of the tenets for how you decide if a war is just or not. I know that
Mhm.
I think it's Augustine or Augustine, however you want to say it.
Mhm.
He has a number of tenets that
Yep.
you must go through to qualify for a war to be just.
Right.
Okay.
And so one of those.
I taught a message on it, like when we started the war after 9/11.
Oh,
I
interesting.
taught a message on war and just war and all of that.
Yeah. So you have to make sure what's happening is, in their terms, it's godly because it's just. And for a lot of time, like the one that gets held up for people in that case is like an example of this would be most people would agree Hitler
Mhm.
and the Holocaust that was an evil that needed to be dealt with.
Mhm.
And so the just war Christian would say the American military and Christians in the American military entering that conflict to deal with Hitler and to restore peace there where peace wouldn't happen. That would be an example of a loving action. And so if you join the military and with that thought, you'd be able to say, yeah, I think this is actually an outflow of my love for the oppressed, my love for the persecuted is leading me to do something that in other cases I would consider immoral and unjust.
Yeah, I think a lot of I don't know. I was going to say I think it's the first tenet, but there can be no wars of aggression.
Right.
That's one of them. You can't decide I want to go to war to take your territory.
Right.
That's not just.
Right.
But I can be a defender against a war of aggression.
Right.
Okay.
And so, but once again, and I would say this is maybe, I think we've done a good job of maybe laying out what the two kind of sides, both of those have scriptural.
That's the playing field we're on.
Yeah.
Basically.
Both of those have the scriptural basis and not just Old Testament or New Testament is the way it kind of gets thrown out. Just war theorists would point to things Jesus talks about of doing justice for the oppressed.
Well, I think we should also note, and there are a lot of wars that you'll see in history, and maybe just because Christians have baptized a lot of wars throughout history on even further right than just war. In fact, Augustine is trying to deal with that of, there was a whole period of time where the Roman emperors would baptize people, but not the sword arm.
Right.
Yeah.
So that I could still go and have a war of aggression.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I could still go and take land.
Right.
I could kill people mean, the Crusades are terrible, horrible examples of these pagans have taken over the land of Jesus. So I can go murder these people. And so there are further right things. And some of it comes down to a warped sense of patriotism. My people deserve something. My people should something. And that's led to some bad places.
Yeah. And so both of those, I think if you are at the previous approach we talked about, not the first approach of, as go the Bible, can I find something that says it's okay for me to serve in the military? Well, David was a warrior, so that means I can be a warrior. Or Jesus told soldiers, what are you supposed to do? And he doesn't tell them stop being a soldier, so that must be okay. That's kind of proof texting. But so is proof texting coming in. Jesus just says, turn the other cheek. So that's what I'm supposed to do in every circumstance.
Or God told the nation of Israel to raise up an army and kill everybody.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
That's a good example of God's four armies.
Yeah. Or the other one of saying, Jesus tells us, don't resist an evil person. And I go, well, that's the only thing I need to know. So now I don't do anything. Yeah. I think you need to have the other one where I try to look at the biblical witness of what are all these stories leading to in Jesus. What does Jesus tend to show us about how to approach these things? Then I'm thoughtful about it in what my position in the story. Because what I would say is about the Augustine thing is that approach is brought up for the sake of helping emperors and helping people like that decide how to run empires.
That's right.
It's not necessarily trying to figure out what does an ordinary person do. So I think we have to have these thoughtful approaches where I look at all the evidence that I kind of can find, especially if, now I want to also make this part clear, especially if you're considering going to military service. I don't think if you're a Christian and you're just sitting in your home and you're going, I'm not even going to the military at all. This is a necessary issue. You gotta go read a bunch of books on and figure out. I'm saying if you're trying to figure out, should I go into the military, having a thoughtful approach about this and a prayerful approach.
And I think, as we say often in here, do it with someone that cares for you and that you trust them and that they have yours and God's interests at heart so that you can sit with whatever decision you make, because there are implications on either side, whichever one you you've got to consider that it won't be just, I make the decision, now I'm done.
Yep.
This is a lifelong journey you're going to be on, that you're going to run into some things that you can't even imagine anticipating right now.
Yep.
That are going to cause you to have to revisit this again and do the work constantly.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's right.
just know that this is not a one-time thing. It's something that it's a direction that you're setting and you're still walking it. Like Ed mentioned this, I think for all of us, when we wrestle with issues like this or this particular issue, we're not the same as we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Right.
And I imagine I won't be the same in 10 years from now.
Yes.
Because I'm still working this out.
Well, and at least well, I don't know for both of you at different times in your life, but I'd say now for all three of us, it's primarily theoretical for us. It is primarily thinking of, I am not planning on going into the military.
Other than potential children or grandchildren.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, no, but I mean, and once again, I like to have these thoughts. I've had these thoughts. This has particularly been an issue I've wrestled with for about 15 years, trying to just really, reading a lot about it, trying to figure out what do I think is a faithful Christ-like approach. But what I do think, and I think Jason said up here, is probably good for us to get into beyond, okay, what are the intellectual thoughts on both? If you were to come to us, I do think there are things that as pastors, I would, when I sit, and I have sat with many, because I did youth ministry for a long time, and at least in the South, it's the only place I've done ministry. This is a pretty typical response when I would sit with high school seniors and say, hey, what do you plan on doing afterwards? And by and large, the answer is college absolutely nothing. And then a big chunk is, well, I'm just going to go in the military. And I go, okay, well, tell me about that.
Mhm.
And it's, oh, well, everyone just says that's the thing I'm supposed to do.
Or it's a great way to pay for my college.
Well, yeah, it seems to leave college as an open-ended thing that I can get it paid for. And
there were all these kind of like, and I don't want to say thoughtless like they hadn't, but when I would sit with them, it was almost like it almost was like a last option. Like if I can't figure anything else out, I can always just go into the military. Yeah. And so when I would sit with them, I'd say, well, hey, I'd like to go get lunch with you. And let's just talk through some things that maybe you haven't thought about as far as your discipleship to Jesus and who you want to be. Ed's already talked about a couple that I had said of, you don't get to decide where you're going to go and the orders you're given. And obviously you can refuse an order once you're there, but then there are consequences for that along the lines. Yeah. So yes, you can still decide like, nope, that decision goes against the command of Jesus. So I can't do that particular one, but there are pretty high consequences that come along with disobeying a direct command. The other thing that I would frequently say to people is, you have to really think through what is my reason for doing this beyond a financial reason. And frequently the answer that was given, and I think this is a good answer, is, well, I want to defend people. I want to protect people. Yeah. I think that's a good thing. And I think that's a very godly thing to say, I want to protect other people who can't protect themselves. Great I want to protect. I want to.
But where does that, to what end? And what are you prepared for what that might mean? You know, because you could be placed in a situation where to defend someone could mean that you've got to take an action that is going to be an effect on you from that point on. Again, we have to sit with that. If I'm put in a position where I have to do violence on another human being, and I'm put in that position, it's him or me, and I have to do something. You have to not only decide right then what you're going to do, but then you have to live with the action that you take. And I'm not saying what action you take is right or wrong, but there are consequences to your body, to your nervous system. And I'm speaking like a counselor, but I sit with people who have done military and law enforcement service, and they had never anticipated that what they did in their line of duty would have such a profound effect on their own bodies and their relationships, their marriages, their children. Again, it's just reality. I'm not trying to paint a case for you to, to say no, but it is a reality that you have to sit with, because there's a lot of work that I know people have to do that, or even not even that, just the amount of violence you get exposed to,
right? Or
you see the aftermath of it. There are, like, for instance, people who work in like a paramedic or first responder. They are not involved in enforcing laws, and they don't carry weapons necessarily, but they show up in places where there have been violence, and that puts you in a position to have to deal with that. Again, we need people in those spaces, but it's just an example of something that you have to consider before you go into that. And I think there are people who can do it, provided that they prepare themselves for the kind of care that they're going to need.
That's right.
That they can take care of themselves as they take care of others. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you probably should prepare for you're going to need somebody to talk to about it. Is it your spouse, or is it?
I think everybody who goes into that line of work where they will be either faced with committing violence or experiencing the aftermath or the effects of the violence, they need to have a professional they're sitting
or
with
even
at all
just to
times.
Be in a place where I might experience violence, where I have to be on guard.
That's right.
All the time that I'm on duty for myself and for other people. It puts you in a place that it leaves you changed, and it puts your family in that place too, because they also live with that, even though they're not out there.
Well, I've had conversations with people, because what Jason's talking about, especially with like first responders, when you're in a place with people where a traumatic event has taken place, even though the traumatic event didn't happen to you, you pick up this. It's like a passed on PTSD.
That's
to
right.
you.
Oh, it's
And it's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
And it's not
Trust
so
me.
like, and this is a farther step away from this, but I'll just say this. My wife and I, because we were foster parents, we had a lot of training that a lot of adoptive parents who don't go through the foster care system don't get. And one of the things that we were really trained on was this idea that because you are welcoming children into your home who most likely, almost nearly all of them, have some form of PTSD from a traumatic situation, it doesn't matter that you weren't the one there. You will pick it up almost as like secondhand smoke. It's like, that's the way they said to us, is secondhand smoke kills. We learned
They
that.
tell us the same thing when they train us for counseling.
Right.
When we sit in the room with traumatized people,
Right.
we pick up some of that. And so we have to deal with it too.
So
So-
I have said to other people, because I think fostering is a beautiful thing. I think it is a wonderful thing. But
It's
I-
a necessary thing.
and it's a necessary,
Absolutely.
but I frequently sit with people because they know our story and they'll say to us like, hey, we're thinking about doing this. And I'll say, you really need to make sure you are the right person for this and that you very much feel called by God to do it.
And that you have a plan to take care of yourself.
And you have a plan to
Yeah.
all of these things, because I don't think everybody is called to foster care. And nor would I say everyone's called to be a paramedic or everyone's
the
called to be
military.
a counselor or to the military.
Mm-mm.
I would say you need to very thoughtfully think through. I do think one of the damaging things that does unfortunately happen, and so I'm gonna talk about something that's not military service for a minute, because I know many people, this becomes triggering because of the culture we're around. But I'll talk about foster care for a while. Our church has never really done this, but I know a lot of churches that they have foster care ministries where they do services where they're like, everyone should go, and they tell these beautiful stories of
Mhm.
the life change, and the children are so grateful, and everyone's so. And I'm not saying anyone's doing anything. I think they're trying to do
A
good,
good thing.
Yeah.
but no one has thoughtfully thought through. And when anyone comes, you sign up, and we go, great, go do it, go run after it, and they are not prepared for what they're running into. And what ends up happening is, because we didn't enter it thoughtfully and prayerfully as we could have, there gets damage done to the family who's doing it. Unfortunately, sometimes there's further damage done to the foster children who get brought in. And I think as believers, and I think about this all the time, is Jesus saying you need to be, wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And sometimes there are some of us, because of our personalities, we're really worldly wise. Because wise as serpents means wise like unbelievers, because serpents are like the enemy, the Satan. He's saying, I want you to be wise in this way, but you got to be innocent as doves. And some of us are real innocent as doves, but we ain't wise at all. And we've never sat with anyone who goes, I don't think you've thought through what this is going to do. And it's not to say don't do it. It's to say, like you said, have a plan, think it through. Then there's others of us who are so worldly, we go, well, who would even care?
That's right.
Let me go after this. And no one sits and goes, but what would Jesus say about what you're doing in the world? And so what I would say to someone, I think our nation as a whole, once we decided the draft wasn't an option anymore, began to basically create a culture that said, don't think twice about it. Go right into the military. And I do think it does. And because we all, just because the nature of who it is in South, have sat with people who have come out of military service, who did it for good reasons. I want to defend people. I want to do good in the world. And it has really wrecked a lot of their lives. Once you get past even the question of, would Jesus be okay with it or not? The effect of what it has done to them pastorally, when I sit with people, I just feel like I really got to warn people beforehand. You need to think this through. You need to make sure you have a good godly reason. Yes, I do feel God's calling me to this.
Because I think you're paying a price no matter what decision you make. And Jesus was very clear about counting the cost
That's right.
of following him. But I think that's a principle that we can apply to every area of life.
Yeah.
When he spoke it, I mean, look at it like you're talking about, Nathan, and at least go in with eyes wide open, very thoughtful, very considerate. So it doesn't mean that if you did that and you go into it, it won't affect you.
Yeah.
It's going to affect you in some way, but at least you knew, and at least you had a plan, and you were at somewhat ready for the aftermath or the consequences of that. And many people would come to that decision and say, "Yeah, I am. I hear what you're saying, and I've weighed it. I've counted the cost, and I feel God's calling, or I feel my duty to do this." Well, absolutely.
Yeah. At that point, I would look at a person and say, "Hey, look, you approached this a faithful way.
Yes.
And now I, as your pastor, want to support you. I want to help you figure out.
Yeah.
I want to be part of your plan.
That's right.
I want to be part of how can we, as you're living through this and as you're coming out of it, how can we walk alongside you and help be a part of whatever this looks like? I think
because I'm telling you, this is voice of experience on this. The organizations themselves will not do that for you. Like,
unfortunately,
the military is, they're not set up for those kinds of conversations. They will give you some support, but almost every service person I've talked to that comes out of it says, I needed more than that.
Yes.
There was much more well-rounded care that I was looking for. And that's what that's how they wind up in a pastor or a counselor's office. And so just know going in that you need to be conscientious about it. You need to be proactive about it. And look in those directions.
And the same is true for many first responders.
Huge.
I would agree. I don't think there's enough on the same conversation. I don't think I just having those around. I would say the same I recently was listening to a podcast, which I thought was really interesting. I don't think people do the same even with pastors, because they talk, because I was listening to one theologian, all of us, I think, enjoy and respect, Scott McKnight, is writing a book right now called Paul the Traumatized Apostle.
Yes.
And the point of it is to say being in ministry is a traumatizing thing, because
you do wind up taking on other people's stuff.
You take on other people's stuff, and just the burdens of the ministry itself. He talks about Paul in the Corinthian church having to defend himself to the elders of that church and all this. He talks about you just aren't aware how much you're in the midst of it. And sometimes I think that's the benefit of maybe talking. This would be my final piece of advice. Talking to people who have gone through this, that you think are faithful Christians, that are on the other side of it. That I think older ministers talking to younger ministers, certainly older service people who are still faithfully following Jesus, who can come back and say, hey, here are the things that I didn't know about and I've had to work through and I've had to deal. Here were the things that were helpful to me.
Try to make sure you talk to one that's honest. Don't just as an older person, you have to be really clear that there are a lot of people that have gone through a lot. And once you make it through it, you just don't want to talk about it. And so you think, well, I made it through. You can probably make it through too. I don't say it to you that way, but somebody needs to be honest enough to say, yeah, there's some stuff. There's some stuff. And you probably need to ask a really direct questions. And try to probe to get at it.
So maybe that gets you started.
So
I hope that was helpful. I hope it was clarifying.
Hope so. And I hope that even if you're not in our church, but certainly if you're in our church and you're seriously considering this, I hope you'd reach out to one of the three of us,
for sure.
Because I do think being able to sit in conversation with someone is even more clarifying.
Well, I would want to say there are very faithful Christians that have served in all branches of the military and as first responders in our country. We're very thankful for that.
Absolutely.
We're just hoping if that's what you decide to do, you'll be as thoughtful as they are.
All right. So there we go. There is our clarifying episode. It's done.
It's done. No more clarification necessary.
No. That's called sarcasm, folks.
I bet we have some other ones that come out of this if people are willing now to ask.
And that would be great.
That'd be great.
Link is in the description as always. Send us a question. We will tackle it as best as we can. Y'all have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.